My girlfriend wanted space, so I gave it. 2 days later, she begs to come back. We had been together for 2.5 years, and for most of our relationship, everything seemed pretty normal. Cindy and I had our couple's arguments like anyone else, but there was always a foundation of trust that made me feel secure. At least that's what I believed until a few months ago. She started to change. First, it was small details I barely noticed. Messages that would arrive and she'd close too quickly, calls at odd hours that she'd silence before answering, and a distant attitude she couldn't explain. I was used to working from home, in my home office, editing videos for the company where I work, so I could notice these changes because we spent a lot of time together. The strange thing was that she never seemed to have a concrete reason for these attitudes, just vague excuses, tiredness, stress, things like that. At first, I tried not to worry too much. We all go through complicated moments, I thought, but my instinct wasn't wrong. There was something in her gaze, in how she avoided direct eye contact with me, and in how she moved through the house with a kind of tension that didn't fit her usual character. I didn't want to confront her immediately because I feared that if I did it without proof, she would deny it and probably everything would become more complicated. What Cindy didn't know, and what kept me quiet for weeks, was that I had discovered Duncan. Duncan was a man around 30 years old who apparently led a normal, orderly life. He had a wife, children, and a reputation for being religious, one of those who appear to have impeccable morals before society. What few knew, and Cindy didn't either, was that he had a double life. I discovered it by accident, checking things she left in plain sight without realizing it, and through an impulse of curiosity more than paranoia. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I searched for more information, and everything matched up. He was involved with Cindy, and everything he showed to the world was just a facade. It was strange to see how someone could maintain such a structured life and at the same time be so dishonest with others. When I finally felt sure of what I had discovered, I was furious, but I didn't show it. I had gone through enough stress at work, and the idea of confronting Cindy without having definitive proof wasn't what I wanted. My plan, although I didn't think of it very consciously, was simply to wait and see what she would do. I knew that Duncan would never leave his family. He was too religious, and although he had this double life, he was one of those people who only pretend devotion. That meant Cindy was playing alone, or at least her feelings for him couldn't be reciprocated in the way she perhaps wanted. The day everything exploded was unexpected. She came home, and with an expression I couldn't fully decipher. She told me she needed time, that she had to think about the relationship, that she was going on a retreat for a few days, and that when she returned, she would decide if we wanted to continue together or not. I was paralyzed for a moment. I had been about to confront her, to tell her I knew everything about Duncan, to end the relationship, but I didn't have the opportunity. Her words took me by surprise, and although I felt a knot in my stomach, I decided to stop myself. I just nodded and put on a sad expression, feigning what everyone would expect from me: sadness, disappointment, maybe a bit of hopelessness. She seemed satisfied with my reaction and left without looking back. 2 days later, the door opened and there was Cindy. Her face looked defeated, but she was trying to maintain an attitude as if nothing had happened, smiling weakly as she walked toward me. I looked at her and couldn't help an ironic smile loaded with slight reproach. I thought it would take you longer to think things through, I said in a calm but firm voice. I'm surprised you came back so quickly. She tried to respond with a casual hello, but her gaze quickly diverted to her things, which I had already gathered in several boxes. As she contemplated the boxes, her eyes began to fill with tears, but she kept trying to maintain a normal appearance, as if everything were part of a routine she could resume. I approached slowly and looked her straight in the eyes. I felt how all the air in the room became charged with tension. I know everything, Cindy, I said, letting each word fall with weight. About Duncan. I saw the messages. I know everything about you too. Let me guess. He told you he would leave his wife and be with you, and you believed him. You were intimate several times, and now he left you, and you come back here as if nothing happened. Her smile vanished instantly. Her lips trembled, and she tried to deny what I had just said, but no convincing words came out. Tears began to run down her cheeks, and her voice broke. Arthur, I. She tried to stammer, but couldn't form a coherent sentence. I don't want excuses, Cindy. I interrupted her with a calm that contrasted with the storm of emotions I felt. There are no excuses. You can't deny what you did. If you're feeling this tension as much as I am, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me, would you have taken her back? Let's see what you think. Keep watching because this gets even more intense. She fell to her knees, sobbing, begging between tears and sobs that she couldn't lie. Her voice broke as she implored me to forgive her, not to let her go, that she could fix everything. But at that moment, there was nothing that could save the situation. I took the boxes with her belongings and placed them carefully in front of the door. I didn't say another word. There was no need to yell yell, or insult. Each action spoke for itself. Cindy followed me with her gaze, imploring for a reaction that wouldn't come, and finally understood that there was no possible return. "Get out of my house," I said firmly. "Everything that remains of you is here in these boxes." She tried to stop me, to beg me not to do it, but I couldn't. I gently pushed her toward the door while holding the boxes, closing behind her the door to my home, to my life, to everything we had shared. Outside remained the sound of her sobs, a raw reminder of everything she had betrayed, while I stayed in silence, breathing deeply, with my heart pounding hard, feeling a mixture of relief and pain, of sadness and justice. Everything had ended, not with screams or violence, but with the truth as the definitive weapon, making it clear that some lies simply cannot be sustained, and that when betrayal is revealed, there's no room for half measures or second chances. From that day on, my life changed completely. I thought that by throwing Cindy out of my house, I could close that chapter and breathe a little more peacefully, but it wasn't like that. Every day was a constant reminder of what had happened, and she made sure I didn't forget. At first, her attempts were discreet, almost timid. She would knock on my house door, leave notes under the doormat, or call my phone with a pleading tone. Her voice, once full of confidence, now sounded broken and full of regret. She told me she should never have asked me for time, that she had realized she loved me, and that she was willing to do whatever it took to make amends for her mistakes. Each word was a mixture of sincerity and manipulation. I could hear her desperation, but also the certainty that she knew I was in control. I didn't let her in. Every time she appeared, I stayed firm with the door closed, watching as her face fell apart before the helplessness of not being able to recover what she had lost. There were days when I felt annoyed, days when I felt relieved, and days when a mixture of both emotions hit me hard. I knew I had to maintain distance, that giving in would mean opening the door again to betrayal and pain. But Cindy didn't stop. As the weeks passed, her desperation increased and her tactics became bolder. She began approaching the neighbors, talking to them as if I were the culprit of everything that had happened. She told them distorted versions of our relationship, painting me as an insensitive and cruel man, incapable of understanding her feelings. She told them I had distanced myself from her unjustly, that I had left her helpless and alone. And most seriously, she assured them she was expecting a child of mine, a lie that had no foundation whatsoever. At first, the neighbors seemed confused, worried about the situation. Some came to knock on my door, asking if everything was okay, if I had really left her on the street. I stayed firm, explaining the truth calmly and clearly, without raising my voice, without trying to humiliate her publicly. Each word was measured, each gesture was controlled, because I knew that any mistake could be used against me. But the pressure began to increase. Every day, new rumors arrived. Every day, there were looks and comments from neighbors who had previously been indifferent. Some began to look at me with distrust, and others even asked me indirectly if what Cindy was saying could be true. It was then that I realized her strategy was more dangerous than I had imagined. She wasn't simply seeking to reconcile with me. She was seeking to isolate me socially, undermine my reputation, and make the community think I was the villain. The days turned into weeks, and each of Cindy's attempts to enter my house became more persistent. She would appear early in the morning, late at night, and even during work hours, ringing the doorbell insistently, leaving messages on my answering machine, or trying to surprise me in my home office. Her red eyes and trembling voice showed regret, but there was also an air of calculated manipulation, as if she were testing how far she could go before I reacted. I remained firm, but the situation became unbearable when the neighbors began to get directly involved. Cindy began organizing informal meetings in front of my house, talking to the neighbors about how I had left her alone and abandoned. Her words filled with drama, acted tears, and a story that had nothing to do with reality. The supposed pregnancy, the injustice of my attitude, the loneliness in which she said she had been left. Some neighbors began to look at me with suspicion. Others directly confronted me, asking why I had acted that way. What was most painful was seeing how the lie materialized on the walls of my own house. One morning, upon opening the door, I found the word coward painted with black spray paint on one of the side walls. At first, I thought it might be some isolated act of vandalism, maybe bored youths. But the next day, another phrase appeared, not a real man. And after that, more, all directed at me, all with the clear intention of publicly humiliating me. I cleaned the walls each time, spending time and money on paint to cover the offenses, but the message repeated again and again, like a cruel reminder that I could no longer trust even the neighborhood I had considered peaceful. There were nights when I heard laughter outside, hurried footsteps, the sound of a spray can being shaken, and I knew that at dawn I would find another mockery written on my house. I tried to ignore it, maintain calm, continue with my work from home as if nothing were happening. But the tension was unbearable. Every time I went out to buy groceries or take out the trash, I felt the stares drilling into my back, comments murmured behind my back, and the constant weight of the lie that Cindy had planted. The lowest point came one day when everything overflowed. It was an afternoon like any other. I had finished working and decided to go out for a walk walk to clear my mind. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I heard a loud voice calling my name. It was Gary, a typical neighbor who called himself a protector of women. Tall, burly, always with an air of superiority, as if he were the moral guardian of the neighborhood. I had seen him several times talking to Cindy on the street, listening to her attentively, believing every word she said. "You," he shouted, pointing his finger at me. "So here's the coward everyone's talking about." I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help feeling my stomach tighten. "Gary, I don't know what Cindy told you, but it's not true." "Shut up," he interrupted me, approaching with firm steps. "How dare you leave her alone, throw her out on the street, and on top of that, knowing she's expecting a child?" I took a deep breath. That pregnancy lie kept growing like a snowball. "Gary, there's no child. That's a lie. You don't know the truth. You only heard one side of the story." His face reddened with fury. He came even closer, so close I could feel his breath charged with rage. "I don't need to hear your version," he shouted. "I know perfectly well what kind of man you are." Suddenly, he pushed me hard against the fence of my own house. I felt the blow on my back, and a sharp pain ran through my body. My first impulse was to defend myself, to push him back, but I held back. I was clear that any reaction from me could be used against me. "Gary, back off," I said in a firm voice, although inside I was trembling. "I don't want problems with you." But he wasn't listening to reason. With a gesture full of rage, he raised his fist and landed a direct blow to my cheek. The pain was immediate, a burning that made me stagger to one side. I heard in the distance the screams of other neighbors watching the scene, some encouraging him, others surprised. I brought my hand to my face, feeling the hot, swollen skin. Inside, everything screamed that I should return the blow, that I should defend myself, but my mind was stronger than my instincts. I knew that if I responded, the narrative that Cindy had invented would be consolidated. It would see me as the aggressor and not a real man they had already painted on my walls. So I didn't do it. I stayed still, breathing deeply, with my dignity intact, although my body hurt. "Are you done?" I said to him calmly, although my voice trembled. Gary stepped back, surprised that I hadn't reacted. Maybe he expected a fight, something that would confirm what he wanted to believe about me, but I didn't give him that satisfaction. I entered my house, closed the door, and stayed for a few minutes leaning against it, with my cheek throbbing and my heart racing. The tears didn't come out, but the rage did. I couldn't allow this to continue like this. It wasn't just a couple's problem. It was harassment, violence, defamation. That same night, I went to the police station. With my face still marked by the blow, I filed a formal complaint against Gary for assault and against Cindy for defamation, harassment, and indirect vandalism. I brought photos of the vandalized walls, voice messages she had left me, and recordings of her lies in which she claimed to be pregnant. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The officer who attended to me listened to everything attentively and nodded from time to time. He asked me several times if I was sure I hadn't responded to Gary's blow, and I repeated the same thing. I didn't. I didn't want problems. I just wanted the truth to come to light. Weeks passed of procedures, statements, and visits to the public ministry. It wasn't easy. Cindy tried to victimize herself even more, crying in front of the authorities and painting me as a monster who had abandoned her. Gary, for his part, tried to justify his aggression by saying he did it in defense of a helpless woman. But the lack of evidence in his favor, added to the records of my previous complaints, began to tip the scales. Finally, a lawsuit proceeded. Cindy was formally notified, and for the first time in all this time, I saw in her eyes a flash of fear. They were no longer tears of manipulation. They were tears of someone who was beginning to realize that the consequences had arrived. Gary also faced charges for assault, and although he tried to pass himself off as a hero, the law didn't see it that way. What for him was an act of justice was nothing more than an unjustified physical attack. It was a long process, full of paperwork and appearances, but each step was a reminder that I had done the right thing by not returning the blow. Each document, each statement gave me a little more strength to move forward. I'm not going to lie, the road was hard. The stigma in the neighborhood didn't disappear immediately. The stares continued to weigh on me, and the words "coward" and "not a real man" still resonated in my head every time I went out on the street. But now I had something more important, the certainty that the truth was on my side, and that no matter how much Cindy tried to manipulate everyone, justice had greater weight than any rumor. That was perhaps the hardest lesson of all, learning to contain myself, not to react with fists, but with my head. Because I understood that dignity isn't defended by hitting harder, but by resisting and demonstrating the truth, even when it seems everything is against you. And so, with the lawsuit in progress, with the neighbors slowly realizing the truth, I began to recover some of what I had lost: my tranquility, my voice, my life. Several months have passed since all this happened. Looking back, I still feel a mixture of anger, relief, and also some sadness. Not because I want to get back with Cindy. That would be impossible after everything she did, but because I never thought the person to whom I opened my life and my home would be capable of going so far just out of spite. After the complaint, things moved faster than I expected. I had compiled evidence of everything: the building's security cameras showing Cindy harassing me at the entrance, the audios I recorded when she shouted at me that I had left her pregnant, something that was never true, the graffiti graffiti on my walls, and even the medical report confirming there were never any signs she was expecting a child. All of that, plus the statements of some neighbors who ended up admitting she manipulated them, were enough for the case to proceed. When the trial arrived, Cindy tried to show herself as the perfect victim, crying, saying I had abandoned her overnight, that I didn't give her support in a supposed pregnancy, that she suffered emotionally because of me. It was grotesque to hear her invent so many things in front of everyone, looking me in the eyes as if she still believed she could convince me. But the most shocking thing was when my lawyer showed her messages with Duncan, the evidence of her infidelity, and the fact that during that time to think, what she was really looking for was to confirm if Duncan was going to leave his wife. That was the first crack in her facade. The judge looked at her with a seriousness that made me feel that finally the truth was coming to light. Gary, for his part, had no better luck. He had been presented as a concerned neighbor, but the security recordings clearly showed him hitting me on the street without me reacting. In addition to the testimonies of other neighbors who confirmed how he insulted me and incited me to fight, that was enough to make it clear that he wasn't just a busybody, but also someone who acted with unjustified violence. The verdict was a relief. It was proven that there was never any mistreatment on my part, that Cindy was never pregnant, and that both she and Gary acted against me in a malicious manner. The judge ordered that both be convicted, Gary for physical assault and Cindy for defamation, harassment, and moral damages. What surprised me most was the financial resolution. Cindy now has to pay me compensation for damages. It's not a millionaire amount, but it's enough that she'll have to carry the consequences of her actions for years. I'm not going to deny that there was a certain taste of justice in hearing that part of the sentence. After so many sleepless nights, so much stress, feeling that the system worked in my favor was a balm. I know many will think I won, but actually what I feel is different. Yes, I freed myself from a toxic and manipulative person and the truth came to light. But the experience left marks. For weeks after the trial, I would still startle at hearing noises outside my apartment. I was afraid of seeing graffiti on the walls again or finding Cindy waiting for me at the door. That paranoia gradually faded, but it made me aware of how fragile tranquility can be when someone decides to destroy it with lies. Today I feel good, better than I thought I would be. I recovered the calm in my house. I refocused on my work and especially on myself. I don't have a partner and I'm not looking for one right now. I don't want to repeat past mistakes or rush. I prefer to take my time and truly heal. What motivated me to write this here is because I feel there's a topic that's rarely talked about seriously. What it really means when someone asks you for time in a relationship. Cindy asked me for it as if it were an innocent gesture, as if it were normal to think things through better. But behind that request were deceptions, betrayals, and a hidden plan. For me, that phrase no longer means anything good. It's simply an excuse to justify decisions that have already been made in silence. And I also want it to be understood what a spiteful person can do. Cindy wasn't satisfied with the relationship ending. She didn't accept that her affair with Duncan wouldn't lead anywhere. She decided to sink me, manipulate the neighbors, invent a pregnancy, tarnish my reputation, and even orchestrate physical aggressions against me. All because she couldn't stand that I closed the door on her after discovering her betrayal. The truth is, I never imagined someone could lie that way. I thought those things only happened in movies or in stories you read on the internet. But now it happened to me. And if I learned anything, it's that you can't underestimate how far someone can go when they act from resentment. Today, months later, I feel stronger. Not because I came out unscathed, but because I survived something that really shook me completely. And because I learned that mental peace and dignity are worth much more than any relationship. If someone reading this is going through a similar situation, I just want to tell you something. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. Don't allow another person's lies and manipulations to destroy you. Document everything. Seek legal support if necessary. And above all, don't give in to emotional blackmail. I've already closed this chapter of my life. And although it still hurts to have trusted so much in someone who didn't deserve it, I'm also grateful that all this came to light before there was a bigger commitment like marriage or children. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather have discovered Cindy for who she really is than to have continued living in a lie.